wants you to win secretly. Hello, this is the 9th time I've tried to record this. I keep just starting and then I'm like, nah, we have to barrel on. We have to barrel through. Just like when I was putting my eyeliner on and I drew the wing out way too far. When you draw the wing out too far, you just have to commit. Much like when you're fighting the ancient spirit, that big stupid deer thing, and it's like, oh, you're too low level, Jessica, maybe just walk away. Or you could be me and beat your head against its big stupid antlers and big giant attacks for a full hour. And then you beat it. And then you feel like a hero who's been to hell and back, but a hero. And that's why people play From Software games, isn't it? It's to be in one of the most beautiful but unbelievably oppressive video game worlds and still snatch victory from the jaws of almost constant defeat. When you put it that way, and how the game was perceived to me before I personally got into it, because this is the first proper From Software game that I've tucked into, I just thought it would be unpleasant. I was like, why would I want to do that? My username is Temper Tress because I have a crappy childish temper when it comes to not just video games, most things. No one will play Monopoly with me for very valid reasons. But it just didn't seem fun to me to just struggle and struggle. But it's only been upon playing Elden Ring for the first time, yes, I love being late as hell to the party, that I'm realizing the game really does believe in me more than I believe in myself. The first title I wanted to give this video was Why Elden Ring Believes in You More Than You Believe in Yourself. But I think Why Elden Ring Secretly Wants You to Win is probably a little bit more sensible and less outing my issues. As a massive RPG fan, but mostly a fan of old school WRPGs and CRPGs, and not necessarily JRPGs, the first end-to-end JRPG I absolutely adored was Persona 5 Royal, the game I won't shut up about. I mean, technically Elden Ring, FromSoft, you know, we are talking about a Japanese studio creating role-playing games, even though you might not associate the FromSoft games with other JRPGs you might have played before. There's definitely still that flavor in there. There's a density to the systems. There's that fascination with this old English medieval type themes and things like that. And then it's just these heavy, very realized enemy designs and environments and just the things that I'm not 100% sure. It's like Japanese horror movies versus Western horror movies. There's a side of creativity there that is just straight up terrifying in the best way. But like, you're just like, oh, damn. That's f***ed up. So I'm about 30 hours into Elden Ring. As I said, I'm really late off the mark. And it's really interesting how I think Elden Ring is kind of undermined by its reputation preceding itself in terms of its difficulty. I didn't pick it up because I'm like, this just sounds like a brutal, miserable nightmare. And it is the complete opposite. That isn't to say it's not hard. Stupid ancient spirit deer. And those freaking stone gargoyles, why can they hit so hard? They have so much defense and they hide. It's all bullshit. But Elden Ring wants you to thrive, and it wants you to thrive on your own merits and your own skills, and it just trusts you in a way that I don't think many video games do. To just drop you in a world that brutal, where almost everything is capable of finishing you off in 2 or 3 hits, if that, and not giving you a heading. Every time I pick up Elden Ring to play it again, it's not which quest do we do or which area are we working to going to. It's north, south, east, or west. Now I'm like 30 hours into the game, but that's crazy to me. To have that trust in two things, really. You got that trust in your players that they'll have that drive to explore just on the back of exploration itself. It's that old school Zelda, the way that game was designed, just trusting that the spirit of adventure and exploration in gamers kind of serves as its own motivation. And then I think the other side of that, which is probably more difficult for Elden Ring now than it might have been when the first Legend of Zelda was coming out, is that we're in an unbelievably saturated market. In the scope of open world RPGs, there are a lot of different games to choose from. And there are a lot of games to choose from that aren't necessarily propping you up against a whole marketing campaign of prepare to die. Even if that's, not specifically Elden Ring, it's all of FromSoft. But there are a lot of other places that gamers could look for their open world RPG experiences. Elden Ring secretly wants you to win in a couple of different ways. For example, the whole exploration side. Now, you have to explore in this game. The game isn't just like, here's an objective marker. Why don't you go over here and do this? Why don't you kill 2 boars over that way? It's never 2. It's 15 or 25. RPGs. You don't get that reliable dopamine of tick, 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 fixing up a to-do list that I personally love in an RPG because it just feels very satisfying. So it has to give you something else. And it's willing to step aside from all these tried and true RPG mechanics, like make sure gamers know exactly what everything does at all points. There is so much of Elden Ring and lots of FromSoft games where you got to figure out a lot of things for yourself. You are just going to inevitably be stuck. And in one of the core ways you end up stuck is, what am I going to do next? And that question is completely up to you. There's nothing pushing you or holding your hand or anything more than sometimes lightly suggesting that, well, maybe you go this way, maybe you take on that person next. But there's nothing actually making you do that. It's not just about trusting players to pull that off, it's also making sure they reward you for it. And this sort of leans into why the game secretly wants you to win. If you do head off to random butt nowhere and walk up a tower because, I don't know, you just felt like the thing to do and you hadn't walked into that particular area, so what might be there? You open a chest and you get a cool new weapon, or, as would have happened to many of you, I'm sure, and happened to me the other day, you get transported to a brand new area of the map. It's the consistent reward that if you explore, you will find new things to battle, new things to pick up, new biomes. And it's not just about the loot, it's also just what you get to see. From Software's ability to distill Japanese horror into its enemy designs and its biomes, everything feels so threatening, but it's so beautiful. It has this macabre appeal that even if you do venture off to the edge of a map and maybe all you come across is an enemy that you absolutely can't beat, and maybe you walk over to something that looked interesting in the map and it isn't quite as interesting as you thought, there's almost always just a little something to flesh out what is going on in this world and what are the creatures that inhabit it. And just the pure creativity of the environment design is a reward in and of itself. And of course, the other way that Elden Ring wants you to win is with its difficulty. Now, it seems like it doesn't want you to win because of the whole Western marketing campaign, prepare to die, this game is so hard, what are you going to do? That is part and parcel with the From Software name. But I think in Elden Ring, more than any other From Software game, living as an open world RPG, you have so many options of how to engage. You can beat your head against every single enemy you come up against with an absolute refusal to admit that perhaps you aren't a high enough level to fight that big stupid deer. and you can move on with your life. Or maybe you're like me and you just have to take on whatever's in front of you at the time. But whether you're the first kind of gamer or the me kind of gamer, you still get rewarded for how you want to engage. And there are a lot of different pathways. You can grind for levels so things get way easier, or you can beat up the toughest bosses in level 1 with no clothes, as plenty of people have done online. Miyazaki said a few different times that the game actually isn't about beating your head up against a wall. The game is about asking for help. There are summon signs that are encouraged to use. You're encouraged to talk to other players, get tips. There's nothing wrong with playing any of these games with a handbook, like with ideas. My dad keeps trying to send me the map for the first area, and I refuse to look at it. But that's the kind of Elden Ring that I want to play. But if you want to play the kind of Elden Ring where you don't miss any stone that has something interesting underneath it, then you can do that too. It kind of reminds me of, I just finished Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, which is a fantastic puzzle game. And there's a part of that game, I was being beaten up brain-wise by Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, and then I go play Elden Ring on stream, and then I get my ass handed to me in an action game. So I've had a rough month. Both excellent games. Yeah, you could one-shot everything in Elden Ring. That's like how people tell me sometimes when I'm having a tough time. It's like, you can take off that Radagon seal that makes me take extra damage every single time someone hits me if a boss is taking me forever. But I like the challenge of having that on. I like the buff of it upping my stats. I like being a glass cannon. And ultimately, I'm rewarded for that. There's a trade-off. And it's a satisfying amount of challenge. Now, I've said satisfying amount of challenge. So now I need to talk about the DLC, which I haven't played, but I hear is kind of bullshit. And I wonder if that's lent a little hard into Elden Ring having been sort of middlingly rated by From Software fans as not too hard. Like I said, it's just so easy to grind. You don't get stuck on some of the more linear paths that the other games had because it's open world. There's a lot of different places to go, so you can end up over-leveled if you want to become over-leveled. But it's likely the DLC sort of kicked back against that and decided to be really hard because people talked about Elden Ring not being especially hard. And I think that falls into a trap of, oh, people are playing this game because it's hard, so let's make sure we give them hard. We don't want anybody being able to say that the DLC was too easy. And then what has come out is there's still been some people impressed by the really well-designed bosses. There's some gorgeous looking bits and pieces in there as far as just the nightmarish creations that they always seem to come up with. But the draw card for Elden Ring isn't about how hard it is. It's about the fact that somehow it is an RPG that has flouted pretty much every tried and true thing that we know works with RPGs. It's flouted having companions you can form close relationships with almost entirely, which isn't to say you don't care about the NPCs, but it's certainly not something you'd find in a Baldur's Gate or a Mass Effect. It's flouted giving you any clear objectives in the game world. It's flouted making sure that you feel like an unstoppable badass at least some realms of the game, and if not that you eventually become an unstoppable badass where nothing can touch you, which you do become at the tail end of games like Skyrim. More like the middle of a game like Skyrim, where you just end up way too tough as long as you've been doing the side objectives. It also lets you customize your character, but your character isn't really anybody. The customization part of your character is the thing that's filling out your armor, and then secondarily, it's just a bunch of stats that you decide to give them at the beginning in the class you end up choosing. But beyond that, your character isn't really anything to get attached to. Certainly the opposite of something like it's not mechanically an RPG, I would say, but a game like Red Dead Redemption 2, where you feel everything through Arthur. This is very much a game where your character doesn't have any personality or any defining characteristics, But that's perfect for Elden Ring because it's not really about the character. It's about you. It's about your relationship with the game world. It's about your relationship with every enemy you come across, with the bosses, with your own progression and learnings and discoveries. By having your Tarnished be nobody in particular, there isn't that barrier between you and the world. You're not watching your Tarnished have a relationship with the world, which is funny because it is a third-person game. You're having a relationship with that world. I feel like the first game and one of the few games that comes to mind when I talk about why Elden Ring keeps players coming back, in my opinion, is probably Breath of the Wild. It does have more of a tighter, here's where to go, here's what we're doing structure, and obviously the world doesn't come right down on your back as much as Elden Ring's world absolutely does. But there's still that push that you kind of just need to draw your own headings. You need to decide where your own goalposts are, what you're going to do next. And sometimes you are in a situation where it's just, what direction should I walk? Which you'd think is just a terrifying thing as a publisher and a developer making games in 2024, 2023, 2022, when there's so many games that point you in a direction and promise you this is going to be epic, and don't worry, you can take along all these companions who are really exciting and effervescent, and you'll form close connections with them. There are so many things that games do to make sure they don't lose you. And almost all of those things Elden Ring doesn't do. It doesn't give you any easy wins. It doesn't give you any easy headings. It doesn't give you really any NPC or your player character to get particularly attached to. It just has ultimate trust in you that you will enjoy what it has to offer, and it has the ultimate trust in its world and every single tiny and large curiosity that you'll come across and brand new hellscape of nightmarish wonders that it has to offer, that will be exciting enough to propel you forward. If it's not the wins, if it's not having a clear idea of what you're going to do next, for me, it's walking around the world and hearing a random bell in the distance and deciding to walk towards it and seeing this walking island with a building on top of it, and then spending half an hour wondering how to get it down, and then deciding to clean up its ankles by stabbing off the little skulls, and then the whole thing comes crashing down. But even without that last part, which is, hey, I've accomplished something, walking in a direction of what you'd think is a fairly typical video game sound, a bell, and seeing something like that, those are the moments that I think keep you coming back to a game like Elden Ring. It is just this incredible masterwork of creativity on display. And I wonder if that's where the DLC kind of fell apart, because Elden Ring isn't sold on, hey, this game is really hard, finish it, and then it's sort of just this badge of pride that you finished it. It's for the world, it's for the artistry, it's for the lore, it's for these character designs. And I haven't played it yet, I'm only 30 hours in, but by all accounts, there are some really gorgeously designed places and particularly enemy designs in the DLC, but they become overshadowed by a level of difficulty that is, from what it sounds, kind of unnecessary, unfair, and unfun, which feels like such a weird step to the side. It feels like it spawned out of a fear of, we can't have the DLC be too easy, even though the draw card for most people, I think, and do correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, is that if you call Elden Ring just a game that is enjoyable because it's hard, I think you'd be in the minority. I think it's really underselling Elden Ring and any FromSoft game to just say, hey, these are brutally difficult games. None of these encounters are easy, but that's kind of the last thing I think about when I'm playing Elden Ring. By the same token, my whole thesis of why Elden Ring secretly wants you to win is sort of associated with why Elden Ring wants you to keep playing and trust that you're going to without it having to lean back on, you having a button so you can scan the whole world around you and find something to pick up, or you have another button that can give you a magical trail in front of you that's going to tell you exactly where to go. It wants you to win because it wants to challenge you more than other games do in the realm of exploration, in your own creativity, your own design of your build, and yes, your skill in combat. But it doesn't just want to challenge you, it wants to challenge you with a challenge that is surmountable. It wants you to surmount those challenges. It doesn't just want you to be stuck, like in my Lorelei example. It wants that to be a part of the process. It wants you to be stuck and then unstuck, because that is so satisfying. It's not particularly satisfying if you just run everybody through. It's not particularly satisfying if you play a puzzle game and all the answers just come to you straight away. It's not about being hideously frustrating, which is where it feels like they might have lost the plot in how they designed the enemies in the DLC. It's supposed to be about giving you enough of a challenge that it feels like you're doing something pretty special, which you are in Elden Ring. You are doing something special by exploring when you're not told how to, because that doesn't really happen in video games. It's terrifying for most studios that you would be stuck for that long, that you would not have a heading, because then you're gonna put the game down and walk away. Or maybe you don't pick up Elden Ring 2 or the next FromSoft game, but they trust that you're going to. And more often than not, we do, and we have, which is why it's continued to thrive. Because unlike almost every other studio, they know you can do it. It sounds very motivational poster, and maybe it should be, but I genuinely believe that's where it's coming from. I think it's exactly the same as being stuck anywhere. And I think watching a studio so flagrantly flout the 2024 fear that you cannot put any amount of challenge or confusion in gamers' heads that is too exponential, because then you will lose them. Watching a studio prove time and time again that that is untrue is really refreshing and nice in video games. It's nice for the gamers, it's nice for the studio, and it's just nice as a tell for how people like to play games. And that you don't have to yellow brick road everybody. There's some joy in not having a quest log with 14 things that you could pick up at any one time, that you don't need to give gamers a to-do list to provide a satisfying RPG. So I guess I'm saying Elden Ring wants you to win because it wants you to play. It wants you to play. It wants you to keep playing. It wants you to get stuck and then get unstuck and then get killed by somebody 20 times, and maybe you win on the 21st, maybe the 100th, or maybe you walk away. It doesn't really matter, but it knows that you'll succeed. It knows that you'll keep going, and it knows you'll get there because it has a whole world designed to be seen that is exciting enough that you want to see more of it. You have to. There might have been a fumble with the recent DLC, but I think by and large, as a person who's really laid off the mark and has played 30 whole hours of Elden Ring, these are my thoughts. Do let me know if you played way more of the game. What do you think about it? What do you think about my early game thoughts and what I expect lies ahead? And what is your draw for playing a game like Elden Ring? Do you think it wants you to win? Does it want you to lose? I don't think it wants you to lose. Maybe it wants you to lose and win. I feel like I'm getting a little... Don't worry, it's a spiral, not a loop. This is not an Alan Wake video.